Alrighty, so another news of the week episode, and we're gonna jump straight in by talking about some new development in terms of the Matias Almeyda coaching saga. And honestly, I really don't like talking about this coaching saga because every time I talk about it, it's just it kind of makes me even feel more depressing as a Quakes fan right now, seeing the situation that has gone on with this team and how toxic it is with the front office and the coaching, and everything is just kind of falling apart. But now there is actually a new development in the Almeyda coaching saga, and this actually was tweeted out by Fabian Renko, which was one of the beat writer for the Quakes, that Matias Almeyda actually interviewed with Fox Sport Mexico, and he said that he could actually terminate his contract with the Quakes and move on from the Quakes as soon as tomorrow. Now, this, of course, was tweeted out yesterday, so I was hoping today might be the day we finally get some news report that Almeyda is indeed going to leave the Quakes and basically terminate his contract. Unfortunately, that news hasn't happened yet, or at least at the time of this recording, it hasn't happened. I mean, it would be such a classic thing of me just doing news of the week episode, and then I find out later that, yep, Almeyda basically terminated his contract, though I'll probably make another video about that if that does happen. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how this, of course, would go on, and that, again, as I said, this Almeyda situation, I hope eventually is going to resolve, because it's clearly affecting the resort of this team. Like, you can clearly see that Almeyda is clearly don't want to be there, and he's continued to sabotage this team, and hence that's why the Quakes are near the bottom of the Western Conference right now. But I think another thing that I kind of want to mention, that I don't think I've mentioned this before, and I kind of find this out just a couple of days ago, is that the reason why the Quakes cannot fire Almeyda right now is because if they do fire Almeyda, they'll have to pay kind of a hefty amount, kind of almost like his release clause, in order to, of course, fire him and pay out that sum. And knowing the Quakes, they will definitely not want to do so. So that's kind of what's holding back from them in terms of firing Almeyda. And that, for everyone wondering, well, why does Almeyda not get fired, even though he said so many bad things toward the front office and toward the ownership, that usually that's enough to get the ownership to decide to kick you out of the team. Well, again, it's because of the whole contract clause thing, and that if he does get fired, the Quakes will have to owe him a huge sum of money. And yeah, again, we'll see if there's going to be more development story of this. I mean, in an ideal world, hopefully this will resolve soon, and that maybe Almeyda eventually will leave the team. I mean, right now, I've said before, with Almeyda leaving the team, it definitely solved part of the problem, and maybe the Quakes can finally find a head coach that can clearly take this team that when Chris Leach basically built was meant to be for whoever takes next. But also the ideal world and the ultimate goal to really get the Quakes out of the doldrum of the standings is John Fisher eventually sell the team. And unfortunately, there's been no news whatsoever about that. And that, yeah, I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. This team can fire as many head coaches they want and hire as many head coaches they want. But as long as John Fisher is still the owner of this team, nothing is going to change in terms of making this Quakes team to be a competitive team or be a regular playoff contender year in and year out. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, we got the Houston Dynamo signing for Thiago on loan from Flamengo. So a couple of weeks ago, or I think in the last news of the week episode, I talked about how the Dynamo looking to sign this young Brazilian from Flamengo, and it seems like they indeed has able to complete the transfer. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to do, and whether, of course, he's going to get some minutes. I mean, so far, I still think that Sebastian Ferrer is kind of their main man, but having another player and another player that I've heard has some decent talent and can definitely have some good potential to do well is definitely not a bad idea. And it's also kind of an example that the fact that the Houston Dynamo have finally got past that stage where the Dynamo, like the Quakes a couple of years ago, has been one of the most notorious team in terms of not spending money and become very penny pinching in terms of some of their signing. But now, ever since the Dynamo has got their new front office and a new owner in Ted Siegel, you can definitely see the improvement in terms of some of the signings. And that this is also a reason why I said that I hope John Fisher eventually sell the team and that the Quakes will get a new owner, because I guarantee you, when the Quakes do get a new owner and an owner that is willing to spend money and invest in the team, this Quakes team will not be a team that's going to be a regular laughing stock in the league. Now, Atlanta United have signed forward Ronaldo Cisneros on loan from Chivas. Now, apparently from what I heard about this signing is that, a lot of Chivas fans says that, he's an average kind of player, which is kind of surprising, the fact that he did not end up to be a Quakes player, because it feels like, the Quakes invented a way to sign Chivas player, and especially Chivas player that is kind of mediocre and stuff. Though, that being said, with Almeyda potentially leaving, it kind of makes sense why the Quakes might not even think about signing him to join the team. But, I feel like this is maybe kind of like their third option in terms of that number 9 spot. I mean, Atlanta is clearly desperate in terms of trying to find a backup in Joseph Martinez. And so far with Dom Duarte, yeah, I mean, besides his amazing debut that he has with Atlanta, he has definitely been not the answer in terms of what happened if Joseph does went down, or if Joseph does need some rest. Can Dom Duarte, of course, step up, which right now it seems like the answer is no, and that they're hoping this guy will do so. But we'll see if that is going to be the case. But speaking of forward, Taxi Fontes, remember him? That DC basically signed him on a pre-contract, and that he was supposed to arrive in July. Well, the good news for DC fans is that he's actually going to become a little bit earlier than expected. He actually is now going to arrive at DC United after departing from Rapid Vienna in the middle of the season. And in some way, this also maybe be fast forward in terms of what's going on with the Ola Kamara situation. I mean, I believe Ola Kamara still play regularly right now for DC, but there's been a lot of talks, the fact that they are going to trade him to another team, and with the way that they, of course, got Michael Estrada and now getting Taxi Fontes in that spot, there's really not a lot that I feel like maybe Ola Kamara could find himself down in the depth chart, and that, no, there has been rumors that DC is going to eventually move on from Ola Kamara, and we'll see with this recent arrival of Taxi Fontes a little bit earlier than expected, will definitely accelerate the talk that Ola Kamara is going to go to another team. And I feel like there's definitely a lot of MLS teams, especially teams that need number 9. I mean, look at you, Sporting KC, that might want to have the likes of Ola Kamara in their team too, because I feel like Kamara have still shown that even now that he is in almost the twilight of his career, he could still score goals, and that last year was one of the most lethal seasons that he had last year, and kind of almost turning back the clock with the way that he was just a couple of goals away. And I think he scored like 17 goals last season, and just like 2 away from potentially, or actually no, not 2 away, 1 away from actually getting the Golden Boot. I mean, there was a time where he actually had the Golden Boot, but then, Tati Castellanos scored a couple of goals on decision day and took that Golden Boot away from him. So yeah, Ola Kamara last season, at least he's shown that he still got it, and that he is definitely going to be a player that, if he does go on to another team, will definitely help in terms of solving the number 9 position that these other teams might have. Now, speaking of DC, there is sources say that Chris Durkin is set to return to DC United for around $700,000 and give the Houston Dynamo $250,000 to $300,000 general allocation money for selecting him in the allocation order. And also, this source come from Tom Borger, one of the analysts and the beat writer for MLS. But yeah, this is, in some way, this is kind of 4D chess move that the Houston Dynamo decided to do. They decided to kind of select him in the allocation order, only to kind of just move on from him and get some general allocation money. Like, that's kind of a very expansion draft kind of move that the Dynamo made, because, in the expansion draft, we saw how Charlotte decided to kind of pick a player in the expansion draft and then immediately move on from him for some general allocation money. But overall, in terms of this move, and if it does work well, I mean, if it does go through, I think it's definitely a decent signing for DC. And especially, I thought when Chris Durkin was with DC United in his first team, he was definitely very good, and that it's no surprise that there was some report of him potentially going to Europe, and eventually he did go to Europe, join a Belgian team, which I forgot what was the name of that Belgian team that he joined. I think it was like Saint Truiden, something like that. But it's definitely not a well known Belgian team like Anderlecht or Ghent, and or even Bruges, Club Bruges that we know in the Belgian Super League. But yeah, I mean, it's from what I heard is that he was kind of mediocre doing his time in Belgium, and that I thought maybe that was kind of a move when he was a stepping stone of potentially moving on to another club in Europe, so he can maybe get himself in the conversation of the national team. But just doesn't seem like it has worked out for him, and we've seen before where when Americans go to Europe and play for a bit, it doesn't work out, they usually come back to MLS, and this is a good example of that. But yeah, let's see if this move, of course, would eventually happen. But now moving on, in terms of the next news, we got the Colorado Rapids have extended Robin Frazier to a 4-year contract extension. This should be a no-brainer. Consider Robin Frazier has definitely transformed this Rapids team. Like, he is definitely, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best head coach right now in MLS, with the way that he is literally getting every ounce of that Rapids team, and in terms of the talent wise, and basically get them to be a team that is regular, be a top contender in the Western Conference. I mean, when you look at that Rapids team, you look at all the players that they had, it's not really a team that it's going to think that this is going to be a top contender in the Western Conference. But Robin Frazier has been proving people wrong, and that this is why a good head coach goes a long way in this league, because you can have an average kind of roster in your team, but if you have a good head coach and are able to motivate and get every ounce of talent out of those players, you can definitely be a good team. And right now, as I said, Robin Frazier is a good example of that, and it's no surprise the Rapids basically lock him to a long-term contract because of it. Now, moving on in terms of the next news and talk about some injuries. So there is some good news for Columbus Crew fan after that game against the Red Bulls, where I talked about there was definitely a scare that when Lucas Arian was helped off, and that it seems like he suffered a knee injury without any contact. And anytime when you suffer a knee injury without any contact, that's usually a serious one. But it seems like in this case that was not the case, and that it seems like Zarian is going to only miss 1 to 2 weeks after suffering a long-term knee injury. And yeah, I mean, this is definitely a huge sigh of relief for Columbus Crew fan, because if they lose Lucas Arian for the rest of the season, that is going to be a huge blow to that attack, consider he is really the conductor of that attack. Like, he basically pulled the string on that attack, and without him, this Crew team will be kind of almost similar to where they were last season. Where, remember last season when the Crew, even though they had the depth in their team, they missed some really key pieces, and that's all it took for them to kind of unravel last season and finish outside of the playoff position. But now, at least with them, might miss Lucas Arian for 1 or 2 games. At least that, of course, is the case, and not just for the whole season, as they were fearing that was the case when he suffered that knee injury from a non-contact position. Now, though there is some bad news in terms of the injury department, if you are a U.S. men's national team fan. I mean, I'm obviously a U.S. men's national team fan, and I was definitely disappointed to hear this news that Brendan Aronson will not be with the U.S. men's national team final World Cup qualifying window due to a knee injury that he suffered during his time with RB Salzburg. And originally, there was actually some conflicted source saying that he suffered a knee injury and he's not available for the U.S. And then there's some source saying that that's not true. It seems like he has joined the U.S. men's national team. But now I have read more sources, and especially some credible source like ESPN, and even the U.S. men's national team mentioned the fact that he's not actually part of the World Cup qualifying camp. So that pretty much confirmed that he is not going to be there. And yeah, that's another big blow for this U.S. team, and especially with them losing 3 key player in McKennie, Des, and now with Aronson. Yeah, this final World Cup qualifying window, I mean, I don't want to just panic yet the fact that we're in for a disaster like what we had back in 2017, but this also means that, yeah, those players that of course. I mean, I feel like this U.S. team does have some depth in terms of this team, and that I do believe that some of those depth pieces and that some of those players will able to step in and at least hold the fort. But there is no doubt that I feel like there's going to be some games that they're going to be missing those guys in injury, or those guys that is out for injury. I mean, I won't be surprised that in some of those games I watch, how many times the announcer are going to say, "Oh, the U.S. really missed Weston McKennie or Brendan Aronson in the attack," because again, both of those players alongside with Serginho Dest, who there is a chance that Dest could come back at least maybe in the last game of the World Cup qualifying window, but at least we know from Aronson and McKennie, they're not going to be part of this World Cup qualifying window. In fact, for McKennie, there is even a question whether if the U.S. does make it to the World Cup in Qatar in November, there's a question whether if he's going to be available for that too, with him suffering a long-term injury. Oh, and also I forgot to mention Gio Reyna is another guy that is not going to be available for this U.S. men's national team, at least not until maybe the last game of the World Cup qualifying window. So that means now that's 4 players for this U.S. team and 4 key players that they're going to miss. And again, I don't want to just panic yet, because injuries of course happen, and this obviously is the worst time for the U.S. to suffer an injury crisis, because this is really the judgment period for the U.S. heading into the final World Cup qualifying window. But you just got to have to deal with it and hope that some of these players that are most of the depth players are players that is from Europe, but also some of these players play in MLS too, and hope that they of course will step up and get the reserve in these final 3 World Cup qualifying game. Now, one of those players that could of course stepped up is Jesus Ferreira, who of course win Player of the Week this week in MLS, and it's not a big surprise because I've said it in my review of that game between Dallas and Portland that Jesus Ferreira is going to win the Player of the Week. I mean, when you get a hat trick and also got an assist, you're automatically guarantee yourself to win Player of the Week. But I've even mentioned, it's going to be interesting to see whether he is going to step up to with some of the injuries that this team has had. I mean, I did say that he probably is going to get into that number 9 position, but then I just realized that Jesus Ferreira is not actually a natural 9, and that when Dallas basically put him there, he was actually more of a false 9. So it's going to be interesting to see whether maybe Jesus Ferreira might play as a false 9 for the U.S., or maybe play in that number 10 position that Brendan Aronson occupy, even though I don't think that's a good idea, because I don't think Jesus Ferreira is actually a number 10, or during his time with FC Dallas, I think he rarely play as a number 10. Or actually, I might be mistaken. Maybe during the time when Pepe was still there with Dallas, Ferreira actually kind of play in that number 10 position. So we'll see. We'll see which spot Jesus Ferreira is going to play, because with some of the injuries that has happened, I think now it's almost certain that he might get some game time, whether it's in that Mexico game or in those 2 crucial World Cup qualifying game against Costa Rica on the road and Panama at home. Now, moving on, in terms of the last news of this News of the Week, is that MLS Next Pro will feature no draws and will go straight to a PK shot after the game is tied after 90 minutes. And I actually should write MLS Next Pro, because MLS Next is basically the youth kind of league that it has with MLS with those group. But MLS Next Pro is definitely completely different. It's pretty much just going to be like a minor league for the main Major League Soccer kind of league. But yeah, this is kind of an interesting feature. In some way, it's kind of an old school feature, because remember when MLS basically was introduced in 1996, in the first couple of season of the league history, there was no draws in those games. Instead, games would go straight to a PK shootout, and you have those kind of hockey style PK shootout where a player runs from 30 yards out and trying to beat the goalkeeper there. And part of me really want that to return, especially when they announced that. But I can understand why they said that they're not going to bring that back, even if they do that could be for a nostalgia feeling, because again, MLS Next Pro is more about a development league and want to get these players to the next level and maybe get promoted to their main affiliate team that these MLS Next Pro team are affiliated to their MLS team. And to have these kind of wacky, kind of gimmick PK show that we see in the early days, yeah, it's not going to help the league and make those players very happy that they of course have to do so. But again, it's fascinating that every game there's going to be no draws, and that if there is a tie, there is going to be a winner. And in some way, I kind of like that too, because I know draws sometimes could be a good thing for a team, but you just feel like as an average American, you don't want to see a draw. You want to always see a win, and that's the whole reason why when MLS was introduced in the early days and in the late 90s, that's why draws were not allowed, because they feared that Americans won't watch a league where at the end they don't even get a winner out of the game. But little did they know that of course was not the case, and we'll see whether or not if MLS Next Pro will follow that same path. But now moving on, and I said that this of course is the last news, but there's actually something more important that I want to talk about before I of course end this video, and that of course is the CONCACAF World Cup Qualifying standing. Because heading into this final window, I want to just give you the standings and how things stands right now in the CONCACAF region of World Cup Qualifying. So right now we have Canada, who currently leads the standings with 25 points, and for the Canadians it's pretty easy. They just need one more point to qualify for the World Cup, and that you can say that they pretty much have a step already into the door of going to Qatar, or if I want to say it in a more simple way, they pretty much have one step toward the World Cup door in terms of reaching to the World Cup for this upcoming tournament in November. But then you got the U.S. and Mexico currently tied on points at 21 points. The U.S., of course, I think they had a better goal differential, so that's why they're in second. But this is also where we get to the fourth place, and the fourth place is a position where you're going to be going into this intercontinental playoffs against a Oceania team. And Panama, of course, currently occupied that spot with a 5-2-4 record and have 17 points. And then you got Costa Rica, who currently is in fifth place with 4-4-3 record and had 16 points. And notice I didn't include the team in 6, 7, and 8 because most of those teams are pretty much eliminated from potentially getting into the top 4 spot to get into, well, the top 3 spot, of course, getting to the World Cup, and maybe even get into the 4th position to go into an intercontinental kind of playoffs to reach for the World Cup. So yeah, when you look at it, there's still definitely a lot up for grabs, and it feels like right now, especially for the U.S., this is why these next 3 games is even more important, because these next 3 games, not only it's not going to be easy, but it's literally against teams that is chasing them in terms of reaching to the World Cup. And that there's been this interesting discussion of that game against Mexico tomorrow, of the fact that as much as it would be nice for the U.S. to get a historic win at the Azteca, or maybe even get a draw at the Azteca, do they really need to do so when they have those games against Panama and Costa Rica, who arguably those games are even more important than the one that they're going to be playing against Mexico? I mean, don't get me wrong, playing against Mexico, who is right behind them, it's important too. But if they do get a draw out of that game, and let's say if Panama and Costa Rica gets a win, then all of a sudden, it just feels like it doesn't change anything with the way that Panama and Costa Rica, those 2 final World Cup qualifying game, is still going to be a must-win too. So in some way, this is tricky for the U.S. to see whether or not if they are going to maybe go all gun blazing against Mexico and really get a win. I mean, ideally, I think what probably Greg Berhalter is going to do is trying to send out a relatively weak team against Mexico and hope that they can get a draw out of that game, and then they send in the strongest team against Panama and Costa Rica so they can get the result. But I could be wrong, though. I mean, I know U.S. men's national team fans will just say that just put the A squad for every single game because all these games are crucial. Unfortunately, that does not work that way. And in fact, if they do that, this team will basically be tired out by the time they play that crucial final game, or even in that crucial home game against Panama. That I think that game is just an absolute must win. Like, if they do not win that home game against Panama, Oh boy, and it gets incredibly stressful in terms of playing against Costa Rica on the road for that final game. And not to mention Costa Rica, they kind of got off to a slow start in the World Cup qualifying window, but they are in a resurgence right now. They're in a Seattle Sounders kind of type of resurgence of trying to get back into a position. Well, they're already in a position where they can still make it to the World Cup, but now in a position to actually leapfrog both Panama, Mexico, or even the U.S. in terms of making it into the World Cup in that automatic top 3 spot. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And honestly, as I said, next week we're going to find out whether or not if the U.S. indeed is going to be going to Qatar, and that next week is going to be really the day where either 2017 will now be forgotten, because the U.S. of course have redeemed themselves by able to successfly get through the gauntlet that is the octagonal in the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying region and qualify for Qatar. Or we're going to once again talk about the issue with the U.S. Soccer Federation and talk all about that doom crisis, kind of talk about this team of how in the world did they miss the World Cup for the second consecutive window after the resort against Costa Rica next week. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video and all these news on the board. And if there's any news I didn't mention here on the board, let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do a like, smash the subscribe button. And yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.